Well, you know, I love the local. I love when the local has time to simmer, to kind of change its view of the world. All of these cities that I put on my grand tour of rock and roll's greatest crossings of time and space seem to have a sense of personality that kind of expanded the parameters of the music that we celebrate. And it was really fun going on their journey, immersing myself in each one, really deeply listening to not only the superstars that came out of these cities, but the kind of, you know, the locals, the two A's of each town, and how it was kind of an ecology of influences, you know, not just the people on stage, but the crowds, what the crowds bring to it, what they want, how they dress, what the social situation surrounding each moment in time. It was a fascinating journey. It took me far longer than I thought, but you know, it was, in the end, it was really worthwhile because I got to see the whole history of rock and roll in a kind of geographic map.
People say they want to hear something new, but they don't, for the most part. So you're actually not really allowed. Well, you're certainly not allowed full creative leaps, but your creative leaps have to be within parameters of the known world, which really isn't a creative leap. Not really. You know, you know, there's a, it's not a hard line. And then, of course, the downside of that is there's too much music. You know, maybe that's a judgment call, too much, but there's so much supply that it's kind of devalued, and also it's just overwhelming as a listener.
Well, I mean, you see at the club in Prague.
No, but
well,
I had really bad hemorrhoids.
Yeah, that's the whole story that we.
Well, that's the other end of the lips. I'm saying, you know,
that we could not put in the movie.
Right.
When we played Monsters of Transylvania, Lips came off stage towards the end of the show, and we had multiple cameras, and Lips was sitting on his knees behind his Marshall amp, like holding his ass, and I just didn't really understand what happened. So I went up to Lips, and this is all on film, and I said, Lips, what the fuck happened? And he said, I sang so hard my hemorrhoids popped out. He filmed the whole thing, and the problem was that when we screened the movie, people didn't believe it. They just and we had to take it out of the film. I was like, so it's like, this was what happened with Anvil. We did stuff that was so crazy that it just couldn't be conceivably true, but it all was. So we had to the facts, because otherwise the audience, I remember we did a test screening and people were like, that's not really true. Because we literally had
information we don't need.
We literally Lips was on his knees, popping his hemorrhoids back in. We had it on camera while
the drum solo,
while he was doing his drum solo.
How appropriate!
Oh, that's classic.
He's got everything on camera. People did not fucking believe it, so we had to take it out of the film. I mean, there you go. Welcome to
Listen,
Anvil.
the singer, Phil Anselmo, once asked me, goes, hey, Lips, can I ask you, do you get hemorrhoids? I go, well, excuse me?
John Wade had just left the Babies. And he came to New York. Somebody at Chrysalis hooked us up to hang. They thought we'd be good together. So we were hanging out, writing a little bit. We became friends.
Right.
I became friends with Steve Marriott. So we were hanging out. You know, then Carol said to me, "You know who Joan Jett is?" I said, "Of course." I saw the Runaways at CBGB's. And she said, "You want to go down and play with her?" I didn't even know why, but I went down. So I wound up joining the Blackhearts. In '81, we did the I Love Rock and Roll record.
Right.
Hit the road, and there you go.
And the rest was
yeah. It's as we were touring the country, I Love Rock and Roll was moving up the charts, and that's what happened.
I went through a period of, at that time, I couldn't get any good reviews for anything. The British press had gone very much in the accusatory sort of style of things. And I thought I was just trying to establish myself at that point, but they saw me as part of the old guard, you know, an old man of 27 at that point in time. But, you know, Genesis, we did Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. What was the story about? It was about a Puerto Rican punk, you know. We didn't start punk, but we were ahead of that trend. And where's the word punk come from? In literature, the first use of the word punk is in Shakespeare. So he refers to it as a rubbishy person. That's the idea of punk, you know, as it was in the dictionary of the 1600s. What can I tell you?
You know, the homogenizing, which became known as the Nashville sound, you know, was they were trying to compete with pop music. Sure. And, you know, with the strings and the background vocals and everything. And in fact, one time I was fortunate enough to get to know Chet Atkins towards the end of his life. And I interviewed Chet one time. And I asked him, I said, what was the Nashville sound to you? He said, that was the sound of us trying to keep our jobs by selling records.
So, you know, off we went 3 weeks to write and record an album's worth of material.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't know how you feel about it, but a lot of bands, when they start off, emulate other bands because they think, you know, oh God, the Beatles, Dylan, whoever, that's what real music sounds like. We better sound a bit like that. I think before recording this first 10cc album, that's what we kind of used to think like, but there was so little time. 3 weeks wasn't long. We just wrote stuff and recorded it, and there was no time to sort of think and consider if it sounded like what we thought good music sounded like. And consequently, we were doing the whole thing running on instinct.
Okay.
And what happened by the time we finished the album, we'd written and recorded a bunch of stuff that didn't sound like anybody else. Because we weren't taking notice, which is it was kind of healthy thing that I've always hung on to. You don't want to think too hard about it.
What are your thoughts on now the emergence of the hologram concert? Elvis, Ronnie James Dio, Prince, Frank Zappa, where you go to a concert and there are the surviving members of the backing band playing with a hologram.
Okay, I'm going to take a different point of view that you don't expect here. I think they're great, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I went about 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 years ago. I went to one of those. It was Elvis, and it had his taking care of business band on stage.
Yeah, Jerry Chef, Ronnie Tut, sure.
Yeah, had one of those sheer curtains were up there, and Elvis was on a big screen, and there was something exciting about it. I can't explain what it is, but it was like, you know, everybody was really caught up in it. You really felt Elvis was there. You could see the band playing. Elvis was larger than life. And to your point, what's interesting, you know, where the mind trick happens here, this is where the mind trick happens. Isn't going to see McCartney today the same thing? Like, I don't care how much you paid for those tickets. You're not a venture capitalist, so you really didn't sit in the first 10 rows. You're not starring in. You're not Taylor Swift. You're not Meryl Streep. So you're really not sitting, you know, in the first 50 rows of the orchestra.
Sure.
So basically, you're, you know, for $200, maybe you have a what you think is a good seat, but it still stinks when you get in there for $250. It's not happening, right? So you're basically spending the entire concert looking at Paul McCartney on a screen anyway.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
So, you know, a hologram concert, you know, the only difference is that the artist you're looking at in the hologram concert is dead. Who cares if the guy's dead or alive? He's on the screen and the music's playing.
Good question. No pressure.
Yeah.
There was a lot to those sessions, but not pressure was not part of it. It partly the way I am. Maybe some of the other guys were this way. I don't really ask even why they asked me to be there. I just kind of show up and listen to the music, and then I kind of get really into trying to get the best bass part for that music. So John said to me, just they tell me you're good, just don't play too much. And don't worry, I won't. I knew I wouldn't overplay on this stuff, and I listened and played the bass, and it was a pleasure. The other, and I think I can say that the other guys felt the same. It was not a pressure thing at all. However, around the same era, I did the Buddy Rich live album that I got to play on, and being in Buddy's band is nothing but pressure, no matter how long you're in it. And then if you can imagine, not in the band, just I'm a New York studio cat. We don't have a bass player. He quit, so you got to do it. So that was some high pressure of the kind that I could handle because I was that kind of player. And then Ringo's session, really different than most that I've done, because it really was. It wasn't pressure, but it was. It wasn't great. Ringo didn't feel good about us, the New York studio musicians, and why should he? Why should he be doing an album with all guys he never saw, including Steve Gadd playing drums along with Ringo, all which musically is an okay thing, but he was put in. I didn't do it, but he was put in a position that made him uncomfortable, and he communicated that pretty well to us. So it wasn't a failure of a record, but it was. You don't want to be on an album. Well, you don't know what to do when you're on an album and the artist is unhappy with you just because he doesn't know you.